So it is 5:10 on Friday, May 26th, 2017, and we're gonna call the school committee meeting to order. Do we have any minutes today? Doesn't look like
No,
we do.
Kathy was out.
She's still transcribing? Okay. Alright. Visitors' comment.
Hi,
Hello.
Deb Matthew, Taylor Street.
Welcome.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. They're simple. Hopefully we don't make them long, because we all need places to go.
Yes, we, especially.
Okay, in the
yes.
last 5 years, according to the DOE website, 25% decline in enrollment in Granby. That's through attrition and through school choice and through whatever. 25% is a big percentage. You have the school budget, which of course is gonna take up the mainstay of the town meeting. I understand that. My question is at the high school, you have 30.7 teachers, say 31, according to the DOE website, okay? Up to date. Now, if you cut 10 teachers, 10 at the high school, 10 teachers at the high school, they would have class sizes of 18 students, as opposed to the 31 teachers that have class sizes averaging 12.4. So wouldn't you save like a lot of money if you cut 10 teachers at the high school?
Do you know how many students are taking each class?
It says 12.4 according to your
Yes,
DOE
so when you
website.
average it, you come up with that number.
Okay, and
We
you
don't
get-
control the number of students taking classes.
Yes, I understand. I came from another district, I understand, but according to the DOE website, it says 12.4, which means some classes might be as high as 20.
Yes.
Wow. And some might have 12. So you're balancing it out. I understand you're balancing it out. The question begs to 10 teachers gone at the high school, and you would have a great savings. And there's gotta be teachers that are like near retirement that you wouldn't replace, renew. So that's a possibility, correct?
Yes,
Okay. It's not a nice
please
possibility.
do.
You know, some of the things to keep in mind is that by just eliminating teachers, we would in turn have to eliminate certain classes, which means we would reduce
I
class
heard all, yeah,
offerings.
and I
So-
anticipated that, right, in other words, you wouldn't have Spanish 3, you might only have Spanish 1 and 2.
Well, no,
But the same teacher
No.
could be
That-
teaching all three of those.
I understand.
That's actually a little more simplified.
So I think what you're saying is just
I
go to
understand
basics,
districts, I do.
reduce the number of
I'm just
classes.
asking, yes.
Yeah.
Reduce the number of classes, go to basics, offer only so many classes and be done with it. Is
No,
that
now
what
you're
saying?
throwing the dog under the bus, I'm just asking a question,
Yeah,
and it's a simple question.
it is a very simple
It's a
question that has a
simple
very
question.
difficult answer. The
We-
thing is, we already had that conversation,
Okay,
with the finance committee, with everyone else. And you know the answer, it's just that we can't just offer 10 classes and just say, on average, we're gonna have 18 students in one class.
I understand the semantics of a district, okay? It can be done, you know it can be done.
You know, and
And-
we're agreeing with you. We can say, yes, in simple terms, it absolutely can be
Right.
done. But that's a certain philosophical way of looking at how we want our high school education to be for students. So if we're just looking at dollars and cents, that is a possibility. You are correct.
The last 5 years, has there been a change in the system that would have children go to school choice outside? I'm asking, what is preventing them, and it can't be just money, what is preventing them from leaving? Why are they going? Did you take a census of why people are leaving?
And
Can't be just sports.
part of the reason is because of lacking rigorous academics. That's one of the reasons through our informational and surveying folks. And, you know, we live in a very competitive society. So part of what you're saying is if we cut teachers, we are perpetuating that vicious cycle that we are trying to disrupt and turn around. We can very easily cut 10 teachers. Unfortunately, those 10 teachers can be teaching some academically rigorous classes or some choice offerings that students may say, you know what, there's not enough offerings at the high school, I'm gonna look in school choice in East Long Meadow or Chicopee or wherever, because they have more options for my son or daughter.
Okay, and why is school choice, I read the paper, and of course I don't believe 90% of what I read, but it said that there was a school choice that kids were coming here, but now they're not?
Yeah, we still have students coming.
But a lot of them aren't coming back?
Well, the seniors will not come back.
No.
Deb, just, if you can make your questions clear,
The
we
question
are
is
prepared to
that
answer.
the
I
paper,
don't really
the
have time
paper,
to,
I don't either. The
Okay.
paper said that it wasn't as successful. School
yes, there are
choice
fewer
coming
students
in.
coming in to this district.
That's what it
And
said.
part of the reason is what you are suggesting. We just keep on cutting what we are offering. Why do you think a student would like to remain here? Or a family would like to remain here in our district? Because they like what we're offering, right? So when we do no longer offer whatever they like, they tend to leave. And the other assumption that you're making is this: you can cut 10 teachers and the number of students will remain the same, right? That's the assumption you're making?
Yes,
How do we know that?
try it.
Cut 10 teachers to try it? Okay. All right, thank you then. I think that's
Okay, I'm
a
just-
good suggestion.
Right.
Yep.
And what would happen if you tried it?
What do you think would happen since you say that you came from another district?
I think it would be fine.
It will be fine,
I think it should be fine.
okay.
Based on what facts?
Experience. I don't understand the concept of you thinking if you lose 10 teachers that somebody's gonna be put out and not keep their child in this district.
Because it's been happening since I've been on the school committee for the last
It
4
has to be
years.
it has to be more than money and teachers.
Since you
I don't
came
know,
with
I don't know.
suggest some, since you are saying that you are speaking from experience, what do you think might be causing it?
Is there any consistency in the system?
In terms of,
Education across the board?
yes,
There
you
is-
have to keep education
That's what I'm
consistent, you
asking.
are
See?
bound
You
by,
answered, that's great, thank you. I asked if there was consistency in education across the board, and you said yes.
so what
That was my
we're,
question, that was my question.
I'm not sure I understand where you're going with this.
Consistency.
There is consistency in education, because education has to be consistent per legislation, right? Just you have to offer certain core things.
Correct,
And whatever we're offering, where you're going is, don't offer any, music, don't do athletics, don't do arts, cut whatever is not required. That's one approach to it, that's what Deanne was saying too. But when you do that, in our experience, appreciating your experience as well, in our experience, in our conversations, and the information that we have, folks are leaving when you don't have those things in your school district. And that's our challenge right now.
I'm not asking you to cut any extracurriculars, I think extracurriculars help a kid stay in school.
So the alternative would be to
I
cut
don't
10, like 2 English teachers, 2 science, and 2 math.
Okay,
And how do we then provide those advanced placement courses that kids who are looking to get into really competitive colleges, how do we provide them enough?
you have like 45 kids in like certain grades, right? It's not a lot of kids.
No, we have more than that.
Right, but it's you also have to think of it as, okay, for example, I run a grocery store, and I
Okay.
decide we had 10 people come in, and this person took 2 Granny Smith apples, and that person took 3 of these other kind, and that person took another one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so now, do I just cut all my inventory of apples because 20 are gone? But I can't do that, I still have all these other apples I have to sell. You can't, it's not clean like that, I guess. It's not like in 2nd grade, right, where you put 20 kids in this class, 20 kids in this class, and 20 kids in this class.
Yep.
And 20 kids leave that grade, I can cut a teacher, because I have 2 classes.
Right,
But high school isn't clean like that. You
Yeah.
know, you can go in, for example, when I was here, I had an A and P class in biology, it was 8 of us. And then in the next biology class, same teacher, had 30 kids.
okay,
Do I cut that teacher?
Because it wasn't AP.
So
Right.
you can't, so those teachers are teaching classes that are enmeshed throughout. So if you're cutting a science teacher, not only are you cutting science for that grade, but you could be cutting AP for seniors, you could be cutting a special kind of physics class. Unfortunately, it's not as clean as that.
Okay, so would you have an AP class, would you have an AP class if your entire, well, you have 78, 61, 51, 54, 9 through 12th grade. If you had an AP class, science,
Mhm.
physics, 3 kids,
Yes, we would have a, AP
3
class.
kids, you would,
Yes.
would you have one teacher?
No,
Or
you would not.
Or would
See,
you
that's-
have a
that's where
teacher, but
I-
that's what I'm saying, there's teachers that can teach a lot of,
They do.
they can teach, that's what I mean, but
And
you
they do.
should, you should.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We already
great.
do
We're
that.
already there.
Yes.
I mean,
And we've
I
been
appreciate
there.
that you're coming and you're
Yeah.
sharing your thoughts, but I really don't want anyone to think that all those things were not already thought out, and we're basically trying to scrape the whatever's left there. And that's the deal. Since, I don't know your experience, you mentioned your experience, what is your experience with education?
Finance and accountability, true accountability in the Springfield schools.
Okay,
In what
So-
department?
Finance, lunch department,
Lunch department.
right.
okay,
Say
thank
what you
you.
want, I had 52 sites, we were 97% accurate, and we actually, we were very good, 97% accurate, it wasn't bunk.
Yeah, no,
we actually
we're not
no.
debating your
But it's,
experience.
it's accountability, and that's what's the cool thing about just helping people be accountable. There's
Yes.
nothing wrong with it. I'm asking for a little bit of accountability.
I have to change the way you're approaching it. We're not saying there's anything wrong with it.
Okay, good.
And the fact that you've been here so many times and we actually appreciate whatever you're bringing here, that should be a sign of accountability. We're basically trying to understand what you're saying, we're trying to remain accountable for it. What we do not understand and we do not agree with is this linear approach to education where you just take the number of students, take the number of teachers, take the dollars and just do simple linear math.
Mm-hmm,
It doesn't work that way in education.
okay,
But the one thing is,
Yeah.
we appreciate it. I mean, we appreciate that you care, you just come here, you find the time. It's just that, please do not think that things that you suggested today were not really thought out or talked about before, because, it was, at one of our meetings with the finance committee as well, they had a similar question.
mm-hmm,
There are a lot of factors, a lot of variables in the things that we have to consider. And that's why it's not as simple as just saying, there are so many teachers and so many students and we're gonna balance it out for students per teacher ratio.
Right.
Or teacher per student ratio.
right, or employee per student ratio.
Or employee per student
Correct.
ratio.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you very much for coming on a Friday,
Have a nice
appreciate it.
weekend. Thank you,
Have a good weekend.
thanks.
So, the challenge here is gonna be going back and forth on my. Oh, single item. Would you like to drive, or,
I can drive.
okay,
So this meeting is a single item meeting. It is to discuss the reductions in the budget to meet the town parameters of minimum net school spending plus the 305 that we are given. So I do have that document in the drive, and if anybody else would like paper, the leadership team met this week to review again one
Sure.
more time, and this is what we came up with. I can go through it for the sake of the TV audience. The gap that we're looking at is $691,799 with our last discussion. How we approached that was to look at reductions mainly, unfortunately, at the Granby Junior Senior High School. And I would like to start by saying that none of these are recommended reductions. This is simply to meet the requirement of
what if
the-
scenario?
Yes, a what-if scenario. That in discussing this with the leadership team, this really gets to the core of our program. Last year, a majority of reductions happened at the elementary level, which raised class size from the 17 average into the 20s. and there's really nowhere else to cut at the elementary level. So what we have is elimination of foreign language at the middle school, elimination of an ELA teacher, a science teacher, a social studies teacher.
Is this all at the middle school?
That's all at the middle school. And I can talk about how that would have to happen, but that would be the recommendation to reach the budget deficit. The grade 1 position, that would result in grade 1 going from 16 students to 22. I will tell you that's not even within the realm of possibility. I don't even see how we could do that. High school science, we have a resignation in science. We have a half-year grade 2 retirement that we were going to fill at the beginning of the year in order to provide consistency to the students. We would not do that. We would simply hire at mid-year and save that half-year salary. The data manager position, you're all aware of. We have
Which is the new position.
That's the new position. The special education, we have a specialized program that is reducing in number of students, and so that could be a staff reduction, a reduction at high school in English language arts, a reduction of the lunch monitors
How would
at the
that
high school.
impact?
It means administration would cover lunch. There is a line for special education tuition that I have always worked with, so that if incoming special education tuitions are needed, there is some contingency in the budget for that. That is eliminated. 3 paraprofessionals at the elementary level, and the elementary head teachers at the elementary level. So that results in $476 ahead of the gap. So that does not impact co-curriculars, athletics, music, art, or drama.
So that high school ELA position, how would that impact ELA?
So the class sizes, I should back up a second, I suppose. Class sizes would definitely go up. Some of the electives that we do offer would have to be eliminated. Students would most likely end up in a guided study as opposed to an elective. In making the reduction in social studies and science at the middle school, it would require some of the high school teachers, because now they will be on the same schedule, to teach down into the middle school, a couple of sections. In order for that to happen, the school committee would have to revisit the graduation requirements, which are Granby specific and not state mandated, and we would have to align to the state mandated graduation requirements, which would mean that in science, Granby currently has a requirement for students to complete 4 lab courses. We would have to go to 3 lab courses. And in social studies, the requirement for Granby is 4 years, 4 courses, full year courses of social studies or history. And in order for teachers to be freed up to teach at the middle school, it would require us to reduce that to 3 courses,
Which class was that, I'm sorry?
social studies and history.
Quick question, well, there is no quick question. Just trying to get back to this thing. Science position, high school science, doesn't that mean that that there is no more science then? Cause we already had, one position that was going to be, I don't know what we call it, but it was going to be spread out, the position, the teacher was leaving the district, and we were gonna, reorganize around that, but, does this actually leave a science curriculum?
So what, yes, it does. It would leave 3 science teachers in the science department, and with the reduction of 4 to 3 courses, then students could take electives instead of science. Clearly, I would like to state again, these are not recommendations.
Right.
These are just reductions to meet the budget.
In the
Because
event
we-
that,
in the event
the
that-
budget requests are not supported for additional amounts.
And when we reduce the number of lab courses, it means that the class size can be increased, because safety of a lab environment isn't required. So, you know, you can offer the forensics class, for example, with more students enrolled in it, as opposed to a lab class, which we try to keep under 20.
So what you're saying is that with the 3 teachers left and students having to take more electives, if these electives don't meet with their schedules, then they're taking more guided study,
Correct. Exactly correct.
and which is basically sitting in a classroom for 45 minutes
Yes.
doing nothing,
Yes.
or, you know, homework.
Yes. So you could equate it to reducing the instructional minutes that students are receiving.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that, in contrast with what we were just talking about, we may not be doing a good job, our collective we, explaining why it's important to have the teachers that we have in our programs. For instance, the question about whether or not we would offer, say, AP Physics for, 3 students. It is possible that a lot of folks think just there's one teacher that teaches so many classes, and they're for those few classes only. Not realizing that there has been an effort to really make maximum use of
Yes.
everyone's time across the district to be able to offer all these classes we heard students
Right.
asking for, and make sure that we offer whatever they need so that they don't leave the district, basically.
I'd like to say too, it is a real misnomer that our AP courses are enrolled at single digits. We do have one course at an AP level that has 8 students in it, but we have 2 AP English courses that are enrolled at 20. We have a
Yes.
computer science AP course that I believe is co-taught with computer science. So the AP component of that class, which is co-taught by one teacher, this is how flexible we get, is 12 students, and then there are another 8 students taking regular computer science simultaneously. So the idea that we have courses that are enrolled at 3 and 4 and 5, I'm not really sure where that's coming from. And so, maybe it's an invitation to come see the kind of coursework that we offer, because I've heard that before, and it concerns me. And that's not to say to Emery's point, though, that if we had the need, we would meet the need. We have done VHS where we can. If the AP requirement is significantly low. I've been talking with other superintendents in the area about how we can combine some AP coursework, whether it's in a Skype environment. But we all recognize the need and the responsibility to provide those courses. And I'd also like to say, we have had staff trained and go above and beyond in getting trained to provide these courses to students. And I don't think that should go unnoticed. They spend weeks training, and then they spend weekends going to seminars. They spend weekends bringing students to AP workshops. And that AP program, I think, has a real misnomer about servicing a very small number of students. It actually services a large percentage of our students and is a program that keeps our students here.
Well, and if you look at it on the flip side, those programs would be much more robust had we not lost the students that we've lost to this point.
Correct.
Because the students that are leaving tend to be high achieving students who are
Looking for those
going,
programs.
looking for those programs, who are either going to other school choice districts or private school settings. So, you know, whatever we decide tonight, the specifics that you're talking about now and what we're talking about, this needs to get out to the public for the town meeting. You know, we need to, whether it's I don't know how, we can do a
I'm working
PowerPoint or
on
whatever it might be.
I have a flyer draft that I have to get out to everybody, it's not ready yet. With sort of those kinds of things that needs more, it'll need more data put in, but I figure if I can get the bare bones out to everybody and take your feedback, you know, I'm not asking anybody to fill it in, but if someone could just shoot me, like, numbers, so for example, that exact example, I have like a question and answer, do you have AP classes with only 3 kids in it? And we should speak to that.
The other thing that I think is really important is reducing the instructional time to students. I mean, that is critical. We cannot have students sitting in guided study simply because they can't find classes suitable to their schedule. I mean, that to me is just, that's just unacceptable.
It goes to the conversation we had last time around impact. I'm not sure that the impact is always clear. I mean, that's a clear impact. It's not like, you know, of course we can say, you don't have some of the teachers, students can sit on their own and just do the study and take a couple of exams and we're gonna call it a day. But is that what anyone actually expects from education? Whether, you know, they agree with our budget situation right now or not, is it really what they would imagine when they talk about a good high school or elementary education? I really doubt that anyone that we spoke with would really want us to be in that situation. However, that said, if that impact is not clear, that this is what's going to happen when we eliminate these positions, so many positions, then there is a self-perpetuating narrative that says we have so many teachers and so many students. How do we really reduce that or increase the number of students per class? So, as you said, what for instance Deb was suggesting was on average 18 students. And you are completely correct that there are, because you know my daughter is in one of them, there are classes that have 20 or maybe a couple more students in them, even at the AP level.
Correct.
I mean, let alone other classes, but at the AP level, you find that. That we should make sure that everybody understands that.
The other thing that really concerns me is the middle school level. I mean, middle school is so critical, you know, that bridge between, you know, a
Right.
younger child and a high schooler, and with all of these reductions, it's just very concerning to me.
I'm just kind of back to, what does this mean? Like you filled in some of the blanks as we were going through.
Yep.
But how do you get that in front of the people, right, in front of the town? Stuff like, some of my questions still are foreign language at the middle school level. Is that completely gone now?
Yes,
So I mean, that's a huge impact, right?
it's a huge impact.
ELA, is that completely gone at the middle school level?
No, so basically, how the middle school is structured right now is, there are 2 teams with 2 teams of teachers, okay? And at each level, the teams of teachers teach content. So if I'm an English teacher, I teach English sections. And then they teach an enrichment, which basically takes their content and applies it in the real world. So, for example, an English teacher teaching an enrichment English course may send a student to my office to do an interview and a video, and it'll show up on YouTube, or, so they're doing real world sort of projects with the content. And then the students, the teachers may also be teaching, because our teachers are so flexible, at the middle school level, they may be teaching an elective like art. We have 2 teachers who teach our art program at the middle school level. And then also during that time, a teacher may be teaching a directed study, so a small group of students that need more intense support. Then the students, have their regular amount of electives, so their PE, their art, their PE. Music, thank you. That's the one I was looking for. So their band, if they're in band. What this does, and so that's both levels. What this does is it makes the content teacher basically teach both grade levels. So the English teacher teaches all English, no enrichment, and then one teacher will have to come from the high school to fill that you need 6 sections of English language arts to cover the 136 students that need English. And so instead of teachers teaching the enrichment and the application course and being able to do directed study, they would be teaching both levels, and the kids would be potentially taught by someone off the team. So that's the impact.
But then even down, I see data manager, that's a new position, right? So
Yes.
I'm assuming that's not gonna be very impactful next year, but what does that look like 2 or 3 years down the road if that position isn't
Well,
filled?
I think the district's been asking for it for about 5 years.
Yeah.
I think what is gonna become critical is, as the online testing becomes a requirement for the district, right now it's an option, and we've been piloting it, because we don't really have the manpower to load the tests and manage the tests online. As everyone is required to, it is gonna take more manpower to make sure that the devices are ready, the infrastructure is there to troubleshoot on those testing days. And in addition, David does yeoman's work in the actual data managing and sending reports to the state. And as those increase and those needs increase and requirements increase over time, it really has outstripped David's capacity to be technology director. He basically is data manager, goes out, gets the donations of equipment for us, keeps the infrastructure running, the network running, manages all of the accounts for students and staff. It is a mammoth job, and the data manager was designed to alleviate that. So we will continue to overstress a department.
Yeah, that's the type of information I think needs to be out there, like we
Yeah.
can not have this, but 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road, the state's gonna make these mandates and we're not gonna be prepared
Right.
for them.
Right. Yeah.
So here's what I'm wondering. We also need to pull in the reductions that we made last year that didn't come back with the stabilization. I think we have to, we have to have a list of those reductions and the impact that it had from last year to this year. And I think we also need to speak to each one of these reductions in a very systematic way. Here's what it's going to look like if we lose the foreign language, the ELA, the science, and the social studies at the middle school. I mean, I know this is a lot of work, but this is where we're at. We need to paint a very clear picture for the residents so that they know exactly what the schools are going to, how they're gonna look different with these reductions, and how they already look different from last year.
A few things on that. One is, we will not be able to do that to that level at the town meeting.
Right.
because town moderator sent emails to me and the chair of the finance committee saying that we'll have 5 minutes each.
Oh my God.
She had said 6, so she took 1 minute back, and 5 minutes each. Town meeting, traditionally is not known as a place where, the extensive debates happen anyway, so that's fine, but we still have the 5 minutes. With a crisp message, we can still explain what is happening, why it's happening, and what the impact is.
Could be.
Just one more quick thing. We may need, aside from the communication that we're gonna share, we may need some other forum, venue,
Absolutely.
something to be able to do this.
I say nightly.
Yeah.
Well, we
Can
have,
we front
after,
end the town meeting with like a 30-minute
I don't know that you can.
presentation on this?
You mean hold a
Prior to.
school committee meeting right
Yeah.
before?
Right
Yeah.
before.
We
Before
can
it
ask the
starts.
town, I'm not, I
What-
don't know.
why
Probably
don't
30
What's-
minutes early.
what's
Presentation from
unfortunate-
the school
well,
committee.
Oh, you're talking about the night of the town
Yes.
meeting?
Yeah,
Okay, so I was gonna say, what's unfortunate was when you tried to do that the last time, I was one of 12 people sitting in the gym.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I
No,
think
if
if
we
we
did that,
we can
because
front end
the
it,
annual town meeting is at 7:00.
start at 6.
Start at 6:00, that's a great idea.
30-minute
Our
talk,
meeting starts at 6.
Our meeting starts at 6.
We can do that.
We do a formal
presentation.
presentation with the
Question and
PowerPoint
answer.
and questioning and everything,
Yeah.
and then we lead into.
Well, here's my concern. An hour before the town meeting where folks are gonna vote, will that be enough for everyone to really digest whatever we're sharing and ask the questions that they would like?
Well, I'm not suggesting that we don't do other
Oh,
things
okay.
leading up
Yeah,
to
sure.
it. I'm
Then it's
saying
fine.
that, let's face it, Emery, we've lived in this town long enough to know
Mhm.
that we can have public sessions and everything else,
Yep.
but what happens at the town meeting.
Alright, I'm all good with that. In
And
fact,
maybe
we
it's
can
not
have.
6:00, if we can be concise and do a nice clear cut, like you said, we can do it in 5 minutes, we can make it very crisp, we can
Yeah.
do it in 45 minutes, maybe we start it at 6:15 or.
I also believe we can pair, not hold a school committee meeting, but if we're gonna do this as often, a couple of us, 1 or 2 of us, can be at some gathering, and we can invite folks to just come and meet, because, they may have different schedules, they may not come to, they may not be able to come to meetings that we schedule. So we can make ourselves available to be able to share the information, have the conversation, answer the questions. Aside from that, our limited time at the town meeting. The question was exactly what we just talked about. So do we want to, meet next week, following week, once or twice, aside from these personal, individual meetings that we may be able to have?
We don't have a whole lot of time here.
No, we don't.
Well, June 5th, we're already meeting. And next week, it's senior awards night at 6:15.
I'm only available on Friday.
One on before that, I'm just kidding. I am certainly available to do as many, I would call them public, information meetings. I'm not sure how, Emery, I'm not sure I'm following what a formal school committee meeting would gain us in the interim. Did I hear you right? Did you wanna have more formal school committee? 'Cause
Whether we call it formal or not, basically creating a place for us to be able to meet with individuals who are interested in asking questions and are better understanding the budget. Because, we can put flyers out and all that, that's not gonna be enough by itself. And there was a third thing, since I mentioned the word flyer, anything that will be distributed at the town meeting has to go through the town moderator, and it has to be done by next Friday. Next Friday, I think, is the 7th, is it what it is?
Next Friday's the 2nd.
Okay, so the 7th, I misspoke then. It has to be
Seventh.
by the 7th.
You know, I,
When is it again?
I
I'm really drawing a blank.
what,
The town meeting.
The
June
12th.
June 12th.
Yep.
I agree that, we need to do all of these things. I also think that the time constraint is going to force us to prioritize. And I think the priority needs to be, you know, a more formal preparation for this meeting prior to the town, because that's where we're gonna get the most bang for our buck.
What is this meeting? The meeting right before?
If we decide to do a school committee meeting right before the annual town meeting, that's where we're gonna get our most bang for the buck.
Yeah, I'm not sure why
That's
the
where
message
most
would be
people-
different the hour before than next week, let's say. I mean, that would be our opportunity to repeat the same message, because not everybody may be able to join us for each one of those meetings, right?
Yes, and I think it needs to be more formalized. If we do a town, a school committee meeting prior to, that's where we have the opportunity to state this clearly in some kind of PowerPoint presentation, and all of the other things that we've been talking about leading up to this, everything that would go into a flyer and everything else needs to be in that 1 hour session prior to the town meeting, because that's where most people are gonna come.
I don't know how we pivoted to that single meeting, unless I'm misunderstanding. I thought we said we would do that, but we would have other meetings prior to that,
I'm,
and that's what I would like
it's
to
just,
do.
it's a lot of prep work. It's a lot of prep work for Cheryl to pull all this together, I'm assuming, is gonna be a lot of prep work.
For me, I think that a lot of the prep work is actually done, you know, because there is a document that talks about what the ramifications are. I think for me, it's important to have a consistent message. And whatever the important points are that the school committee wants to, you know, reiterate kind of over and over and over again, because I agree with Emery. I think the more we can get out there and share, even if it's a small group around a table with coffee, or a large group in very formal, the message really is going to be the same. And, you know, are we going to talk about comparative minimum net school spending numbers? Are we gonna talk about comparative per pupil expenditures? Are we gonna talk about the impact of reduction? You know, what is it that we feel, or you feel, is the message that needs to be sent? You know, the minimum wage discussion, you know, how are we gonna communicate it consistently? And, you know, to your point, a presentation on that, that's, you know, that's some time, but a lot of the prep work is done. It's more, you know, getting, I think, the committee to see that more formal presentation and give some feedback to it, but.
No, I agree, we have to agree on the message that we wanna put out, because time is of the essence, number one. 6 minutes doesn't give us a lot of time, and even an hour-long meeting prior to the annual town meeting is gonna go by like 5 minutes. And we have discussed so many various impacts over the last year, right? So we do have to decide
Yeah.
on this consistent message and what we're going to, verbalize from here. Because we only have so much time.
Do we have, real data backing up what the cuts do to school kids choicing out?
Right, so the first set of data you have is when the new school building didn't pass for the high school. And what you can qualitatively sort of equate that to is a lack of investment, a lack of programming. So you see your first wave of families make the decision to choice out. And then, you know, as we've cut, I think last year is a good example, when we made the cut, the numbers of families that then decided to use school choice as an option, but then also use dual enrollment full-time as an option. So we didn't necessarily lose those kids, but, you know, all of a sudden the perception was that the program wasn't as effective, wasn't as strong. So yeah, there is some data out there. However, what you also run into is parents who are making the decision at the elementary level. And so you see a change over time in the decision of families to say, oh, I'm gonna stay at the elementary level, right? So you have reductions in you had reductions at the elementary school, class size went up, all of a sudden you start to see more students leave at the elementary school because the perception is that South Hadley, Plains Elementary, or I might as well go to Belchertown now, instead of waiting till high school. And so, you know, there is data to support that. And I think the other piece to remember is, you know, when we talk about cutting 10 teachers, and we talk about the plan moving forward of reestablishing school choice both ways, less students going out, but recruiting back students to choice in, when you cut 10 teachers, you don't have capacity in your classrooms to open up seats. And so, you know, Granby does use school choice in its operating budget. And it isn't that school choice are our STEM programs or our AP programs, it is our operational budget. And so when you continue to reduce, you don't have the seats to offer anymore. And so you're running the risk of, you know, to use the finance committees, not generating the revenue that you had been accustomed to 10 years ago. And then the whole thing starts to shift.
Those two things right there, I think are critical as part of this message, right? That really, the start of this was in 2010, and we do have the data to support that. And over the years, what we've seen is people choicing out at earlier grades. So that twofold. And then the other piece of it is this vicious cycle that it has created over the last 7 years of having to make reductions because we can't meet the budget, and then as we're making these reductions, more families are choosing other school districts or other placements, thus creating the vicious cycle of then having to make more reductions the following year. So I think those are two really important messages. On a more macro scale.
Right.
Can you, at the school committee, or at the town meeting, if we were to do the school committee meeting first, have some presentation to do, but then pick like the single most impactful slide and have that as a printout to hand out at the town meeting, and that's the piece you speak to in your 5 minutes, rather than the whole.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to narrow it down to the impactful message, it's absolutely.
But I think you'd need a sheet of paper in front of everybody to say, this is what this means if this money doesn't come, and it's gotta show the.
Right, so
The fact
it
that
could be as
you're-
simple as this, but it's not gonna be, that's too simple. But Jen is gonna work on that flyer. If the flyer has too much on it just to squeeze in 5 minutes, even then, we're gonna actually simplify the message and focus on whatever is the
Trying to
most
make it
impactful.
less wordy and more
So, yeah,
imaging graph. And right now, it's a legal piece of paper, just folded in half. So we have front, a full spread, and a back cover. And it's cheap to duplicate something like that. So we can try and get enough of those printed up if we can, send them home with kids, or just have them at that meeting. I'd like to get them out sooner than that. Another thing I was thinking of doing on the weekends, I don't know how everyone feels about this, just sitting at dunks, putting it out there, that school committee member will sit at dunks between, 8 and 10 in the morning on Sunday. And just even if it's just a physical thing, I'll put a little sign on the table and just do Q&A.
And we have charter days too, and I don't know if it's too late to have a table, for school committee. you know, to share information and, you know, you shake a lot of hands at charter days. And if we had a flyer that we were handing at the same time, you know, getting information, I think correct information into the hands of people is important.
Well, that brings us back to your original point, which is we need to have a consistent message, and I think that's what we really need to focus on tonight. I think getting it out there, we can brainstorm ideas, pretty quickly. And I really think we need to focus on what it is that we want to say.
Right. Mike?
I agree, the only other thing I would ask is maybe try to get into the senior center, you know, once or twice, because parents are gonna vote yes, right? The parents of kids in the school are gonna vote yes, but is that gonna be enough to overcome what needs to be overcome? And there's a big block in the senior center that may or may not have kids in the school.
I'm not convinced that all the school parents are voting yes. I
They're
mean,
not?
we saw this from the you know, when we were involved in the high school, and I think that was a misconception.
I know the ones that I serve, you know, I'm with the younger kids, and they've still got a lot more invested in the future of the public schools than, say, the high school parents, but, you know, I'm not gonna knock that point, because there probably is some merit there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, the things that I've heard and overheard, you know, people understand, for the most part, the parents, I think they understand the problem. You know, because some of the conversations I've overheard are, well, just tell me what the vote needs to be. So they kinda understand, and that's not to say that that needs to be a part of the message, because I do still think it needs to be part of the message. But the other piece is trying to create the commitment to Granby. You know, we're gonna stay in Granby, we're committed to Granby, and we're gonna continue to fight for the public schools. And I'm beginning to hear that, at conversations at open house, or the arts night, or the music. And I think really capturing that spirit, because it captures why the students like Granby so much. You know, the students feel connected, they feel like their teachers know them, they care about them. When they're in the elementary school, my teacher loves me, she cares about me, he cares about me, he asks me how I am. That is very impactful. It's not what happens everywhere, and I think, you know, we need to remember that as we're sharing this information, that, you know, this is a budget issue, yes, it's a funding issue, but, you know, this isn't insurmountable. And, you know, we can do this, you know, and we have to do this.
And
We have to figure this out, this has been going on too long.
I agree. And adding to that, Cheryl, just based on the conversations last night, flipping the same story. Students and families enjoy more intimate, close-knit environment, but even the candidates for principal, when we asked them what really draws you to Granby, they said, well, it would be great to be in a place where I can know the faces, I can have that connection, and I can help them at different levels, as students. Large school systems don't get that. And a lot of folks see huge benefits in that. Our challenge is the same story, the fact that we're small, also fuels conversation on the other side. If you're so small, do you really need it? And that's why it really falls on us to do a good job to explain the value of education in this town, connect it to the community overall, our commitment to the students, which actually, at least primarily a legal obligation. We are obligated to make sure that they receive the right education by our Constitution, the state Constitution. But on top of that, we want to make sure that they do not feel like, because they're in Granby, they do not have the essentials that other students elsewhere are able to get. And that's the challenge that we have. I mean, aside from this, there are so many things that we still need to add to this storyline, right? Part of it is, you know, we had the regionalization conversation, which was, you know, hot topic at one point. I really credit Jen for putting that together, which I hear informed a lot of folks who did not know what the ramifications of regionalization might be. Just like everything else, there are pros and cons, but on the con side, there are major investments, at least upfront for this first so many years, that will more than likely increase our cost rather than decreasing. There is the macroeconomic factor. It's not like a school exists in a vacuum. The school has, or a good educational system has its own benefits. This is something that we've been talking about. I think this time around, between Marie and me, we have so many researchers that we can share, some of them fairly simple. Some of them even put together or collected by the Association of Realtors, National Association of Realtors, showing the value of real estate declining in communities where education is not up to par. Because when you go buy a property and you probably see new structures, new buildings around this town, when you are going to a new town to make a purchase, if you are within a certain age group, one of the top 4 factors includes the quality of the educational system. And it helps everyone, that helps this town really self-sustain. Again, there are so many things that we can share to impress the value of a good educational system, not only for students and community, but for everybody else.
So here's a question.
We don't have enough time.
Here's a question.
Yes.
If I was walking in to, let's just use this school committee meeting prior to the town meeting. If I was just walking in for the very first time, and I didn't know if I was gonna vote yes or no, what is it that you want me to know? What do you think are the top 3 things that you would want somebody like me to know, to convince me that I need to vote yes for money out of stabilization and for an override?
Do you wanna go first?
No, I don't, because I'm asking the question,
Oh.
so I can't think and ask the question.
Wow,
I just
that-
came up with that one.
Well, it's a
But,
great question
It
because
is a good question.
that really is sort of the meat and potatoes.
That's our
Yes.
target, right?
I think my first one would be, what you mentioned earlier, Cheryl, and what you repeated as key points. In one shape or another, those are key. The first thing would be is that cutting dollars from our budget is not really helping us as a town solve the problem. In fact, it makes the problem worse. And we can refer to points in time where we have seen major declines in our enrollment because of the perception that we were not going to offer certain things. And last year is one of those. Look at the dramatic increase last year, and most people had to commit before the June town meeting. And, you know, once they were committed, they were done. We were talking about this huge gap, and $500,000 we reduced. And
can I just interrupt
Yeah.
you for a second? Let's suppose that I'm a person with a very short attention span.
yes, then you're not talking to me.
Okay, so this is the point I'm trying to get at.
We've cut for 3 years and it has not equaled success.
So it's the vicious cycle argument.
Yeah, and
Is
then we
what
go
I'm
into
hearing.
vicious cycle.
Okay,
And
so
then, yeah.
we need a narrative around that argument that, again, is going to convince somebody who is on the fence and somebody who has a very short attention span, right? We
Yep.
need to keep this crisp. I like that word crisp. So every time that we wanna go off somewhere else, because a point leads to another point, leads to another point, and we're 10 points away from the original point. So every time we wanna do that, we have to keep honing our
How much have we cut?
message.
3 years total.
Well, that was
That's
the other
2 years.
piece, right? We need to, which I think is important, one of my
We're
top
out of
3.
efficiency.
We
so-
need to go back to at least from the, in my mind, to when I first got on the school committee, because we've been reducing every year. we need to know exactly the impact from 4 years ago, every year. What does a student from 4 years ago look like versus a student 4 years later? You know, that's the impact.
So
That to me is very impactful.
I think the question, if I may, what does a student not have now
Yes, thank
that they
you.
would have had?
Yes,
4
how
years
do,
ago.
how do those students look different? That's one of my questions, so I'm just brainstorming, but, so the vicious cycle,
Well, I'm sorry, I think it all kind of gets wrapped up into one. I kind of got the three different things here is like, what were the total cuts is kind of what you were just talking about, right? What these cuts mean, and then the fact that, you know, the cuts are perpetuating the problem, right?
right, the vicious cycle argument is the more we have to reduce, the more we lose students.
And then I think we also need to make sure we make a clean point about how the value of your school is the value of your town, and that the two do not exist without each other. We have neighbors who've been down this road, and you'd be hard pressed to find anyone in this town willing to move to either of those few places. Right? It creates blight, it creates, you know, property values plummeting, homes aren't gonna sell, there's gonna be no building. Our entire town economy is based on families. We don't have another huge condo, we have a little tiny condo place in this town, we have no big apartment complexes. We have single-family homes. People buying single-family homes today aren't gonna send their kids to a terrible school. They will not buy in this town.
So then here's another question though. Because these couple of things so far are based in something that we can provide data for, right?
Yep.
That, not so much. I mean, we can provide we can provide studies and articles and that kind of thing. But we also have a faction of folks in this town who don't really care.
I think there is an argument to be made that you could look at minimum net school spending, the percent that a town spends over minimum net school spending and their accountability status. And so when you start looking at a district in terms of, we were a level 1, we've gone to a level 2, as we continue to cut programming, when students make the decision to leave, we're left with less students. And, you know, when we look out at towns that are spending 1, 2, 3% over minimum net school spending, and you look at their accountability levels, the majority of them are level 3 and 4. And so you can begin to start to make the argument that, you know, what you spend in a school district does translate into accountability for the school system. And I will say, it's the Palmer Ware Munson. You know, go ahead and look at what they spend over minimum net school spending and compare your Hadley, South Hadley, Belchertown with what they're spending over minimum net school spending and look at their levels.
And you can even wrap into how long homes are on the market for when they get put up for sale, and what they actually sell for versus what the original asking price is.
I mean, is that something we want to?
Well, right now, we're just kind of brainstorming.
Okay.
What we think,
Yeah.
you know, like all of us here, what we think are the most important
I like the,
points to be made.
that point will drive home a couple of things, right? It's a clean point when we talk about, the net school spending or minimum wage versus those given a little bit more. Because that opens the window into saying, we aren't taking more from, it's not that we wanna continue to take money from free cash. We would like to work out a way where this is just given to the schools, if it's not a
It's
fight.
in the base of the budget. The base of
Right.
the budget is too low.
Yeah, that, I think, is important. And that, I think, we have plenty of data,
That's the comparative.
yes.
And if you link it to accountability, then here's your kind of argument or talking point.
else?
I think it's important for us to also talk about, I don't think you're really good there, never mind. It's so hard, it's like,
Well, the other thing that we've talked quite a bit about was our strategic plan. You know, what our vision is for a Granby school student. And, you know, what as a town, how do we see education in this town? And that if we continue to reduce,
That's probably the opening,
yeah,
because that helps us stay positive around what the vision is for the school, for the children, and how we're not able to realize that in an environment where the base of the budget is too low, where we have a vicious cycle based on the finance situation, and that eventually is gonna trickle out into the town.
yeah, that's something that that we continue to come back to, especially this past year, I think, this strategic plan. And it's not just a piece of paper, it's really how we view education in this town and what our commitment is and what our commitments are. What else have we been really focused on?
We've been focused on, you know, what the experience is for a student, and that, you know, when we're talking about the levels of reductions, you know, as I said, this year, it's not sports and music and drama and art, but if this moves forward another year, that's the only next place to go. And I'm not trying to be threatening, but the revenue picture doesn't look better. You know, the cycle does not look better yet. I've said, you know, repeatedly, we're not gonna turn around school choice until the elementary school building is fully open and fully occupied. And so, you know, it's, I don't know how to describe how close we are to the bones of the organization.
One argument, one thing that has stuck with me that, since you've been saying over the last few months, is the canary in the coal mine. And I think that's pretty important, because I really do think that, now other towns are where we were three years ago.
so, that actually creates a nice little, starting out with talking about our strategic plan, and how cutting has not gotten us successful, how we've continued to cut through these years and find more and more efficiencies, and yet we continue to find ourselves back in the same place. Moving on to talking about other towns, minimum wage, accountability, Palmer, Ware versus South Hadley, Belchertown, to what about next year?
What is
That
minimum
we-
wage? What
The net school spending
Oh, okay.
requirement from the town, and then
Alright,
moving
cause
into.
if we actually repeat minimum wage too many times, it may stick as real minimum wage.
Mhm, yeah.
And it would take them a lot of time to erase that.
And then,
So from comparison of net school spending to,
what are we gonna, we have to come up with a plan for next year, and that will lead us into our ask for this override. So we're basically presenting a case to the town, like an attorney, I guess.
where does the actual, or does it, the actual impact of these reductions fit into that flow?
Well, that's what we're gonna be voting on. So it is
So we
probably.
introduce the vote,
Yeah.
why we're asking for it, and then what will happen if.
Yeah.
Okay.
And somehow we have to, and I don't know how we weave this in, but we have to talk about the last few years of reductions.
Yep.
So that could come.
And maybe that's
So that
with
was in
the,
the cutting does not equal success. We've already made all of these other cuts. This is what kids have lost in the past 4 years.
this is how a Granby student, yeah, what is it
We're
that, I
talking
have
about
this
changing our
concept in my
graduation
mind, it's
requirement.
like, here's what a Granby student looked like in 2000.
This is the
8.
experience.
Yes, this is the experience of a Granby student in two thousand
These are the
eight,
pieces that are no longer
and
part
this
of
is
that
what a Granby
experience.
student looks like in 2017.
And for last year, it's fairly easy because we still have what we cut. And, you know, in one way or another, that corresponds to folks leaving.
Mhm.
I do like the idea of that timeline, how you started this initial argument off of, it really started in 2010, because we've been saying this. We have been saying this
We
since.
put a timeline right across our thing. This year we cut
You
this,
put it on
this
the
year this
table.
happened. Yeah.
And
Sorry.
we knew, the friends of the school building committee, we predicted that if this does not get voted, we're gonna start seeing a mass exodus.
And then the impact of that exodus is X number of kids have left.
Mhm.
Since
Which-
then.
Yeah.
Well, I do think when we presented that in February to the finance committee and the select board, it kind of was like, you know, I'm not sure they knew all of that. That, you know, it's very easy to point the finger and blame, but in reality, there's a revenue side of this picture that we don't control.
That is actually an excellent point. That's
Yeah.
the other thing that I think we need to touch on, that this is not a school budget problem, this is a revenue problem, this is a town problem and requires a town solution.
Well, that gets to the base of the budget issue.
Yeah, that needs to be clearly communicated though, because this is not something that the school district can solve on its own. This is something that needs, the commitment from the select board, the finance committee, the residents of this town,
Maybe that's the end.
the rap.
Just out of curiosity, the split, stability and override, what was the reasoning? I wasn't part of it.
What do you mean?
What was the reasoning for only asking for 297,000 for an override? Cause the amount we were short last year was eerily close, like 600,000 last year too, wasn't it, something like that?
Well, I think part of the short answer is the finance committee made it very clear that they are not going to support any stabilization. And we kind of went back and forth, right?
Yeah.
Well, part of the thing is this, I think we started very close to override first, and then gradually went the other way when we looked at the numbers. And I know that the numbers are in dispute, the way we look at them versus how,
That's
how-
gotta stay open. That's gotta stay open. That's gotta stay open. It's a public meeting.
Oh, it's gotta stay open, okay,
Yeah.
I'll open it, I'll run it down there, I won't back into his house, so I don't disturb you, I'm sorry.
Thank you,
Okay.
sorry.
So we looked at the funds available and looked at what rate we are generating free cash and then adding to stabilization. And instead of going to the town, particularly based on the fact that we were saying, you know, for the next 2 years, we have to see where the state situation is going. We did not want to, at this point, go with a larger override request to the town. That's about $300,000, slightly under $300,000. And rest of it is out of stabilization. And last year, when we asked out of stabilization, it was $345,000, it's $395,000 this year. Just $50,000 over that. But what also was clear at the joint meeting that we had, we have one stabilization fund that is reserved for general fund expenses, not for buildings, for anything else. It's for emergencies, but we do consider this to be an emergency right now. And we don't expect to stay in the emergency mode, but, and that's the reason why this, this year and next year will be critical for us to really ramp up again as a district. And, for those reasons, we decided to go with that split.
We do have, the new school override kicking in, right? So we had that in our mind. And we also had in mind what we're discussing right now, which is hopefully changing the base at which the town funds the schools. So there's a lot of outliers that we just can't be sure of right now.
I was just curious, it just,
So we also
No,
were
that's
thinking
a
of
good question.
we were comparing other towns and how much they keep in their stabilization versus how much we have in ours. The state says that you should have between 3% and 5% of your budget in a stabilization, and Granby generally has around 7%. So our thinking was, we didn't wanna ask people to pay that much more in an override, because they're already paying the taxes. It's just sitting in a fund for a rainy day. So by asking for that base fund, that base budget to be bumped up a little bit, and asking the people to pay a little bit more, we're trying to just balance it out with, so we definitely don't wanna impact our stabilization fund to a level that's irresponsible. But if we have 7% sitting there, and our schools are in such desperate need, we were thinking maybe just come down to 5, not even 3, and just take that little bit and throw it our way.
okay.
That
And
was kind of.
then the other question I had is, you talked about there's a revenue side that's been decreasing. Is there any way to equate that to the money that you've been asked, that's been needed? Just out of curiosity, is it a magic number? If it's like, hey, it's 500,000, look, it's really not that much. Like, that's how much we've lost because of, the cuts and the declining enrollment.
Yeah, that actually can be done fairly easily.
So are there any other points that we feel are the most important? Again, if I was walking in on the fence and you're trying to convince me to vote yes.
Well, you told me not to because I talk too much.
No, I'm just trying to refocus
No,
us. I'm trying to keep us
I'm kidding.
focused, so we're not here until 10 o'clock tonight.
I think it is worth mentioning, since you just did in a different context, this new building next door. That is one of the few buildings that will be available in this area for elementary school students, and we are really looking forward to having folks coming this way. We have to make sure that it's not just a building, there is the appropriate education instruction in it. We already heard from some folks, even that scarcely attended public hearing, that there are students who might be interested coming this way from other towns
14.
because 14 now?
Yep.
See?
Really?
Nice.
We have to mention those numbers.
That's the point, right? That's the point we're trying to make is, look, people, you guys just invested a huge amount of money and put your support behind a brand new building in this town. And that's piece number one. Piece number two is making sure that we have the educational program to accommodate such a beautiful building. Right, otherwise it's just an empty, it's just an empty shell.
These are 14 total that we know for school choice right now, in addition to those we already have.
These are new.
Do we know the number? I mean, we do, and you mentioned it before, but I don't remember the number of school choice students in senior class this year.
I believe it was 14, or 12 or 14, but yeah.
So we are able to make up for that.
So we're neutral right now.
That's
We're
pretty
neutral,
good.
Right, and last year we didn't open school choice in kindergarten, and our school choice
Yeah.
students came late. So this is certainly a step in the right direction. And what we're hearing is that these families are reaching out to, their families, as somebody I think said last night, maybe it isn't just, you know, one family that decides to choice, it's sort of like a group of people and then they carpool and, you know, they, and that's how it grows.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. The challenge with having our finance leg of the town meeting in June, in almost mid-June, is that some folks who might be interested in coming are waiting for the resolution of budget issues. And, you know, by that time, unfortunately, just like last year, they might have committed somewhere and then, yeah.
So I've been working with Chris, and I think Chris has been very open to this discussion around looking at the timeline, because one of the things that is unfortunate is that, you know, as you all know, these reductions require notification to people who may not have a position next year because of the budget. And because we don't know what that number is on June 1st, I have to tell people they may not have a job. And that creates a part of the cycle and the stress in the system. And so Chris and I have been working on the potential of going back to a single meeting, or at least getting a vote for the school department early so that that doesn't have to happen anymore. So in other words, whether it's part of the May meeting or whether it's, you know, the June meeting is brought into May. But clearly that has a huge impact in how we're able as a school department to budget and to move forward. So I do think that's going to be an important conversation, as is the conversation around the budget cycle and the budget conversation in total. So when are we meeting in October to review school choice numbers? When are we meeting in September to review the Senate, the final numbers of the budget? You know, what, all of those kinds of conversations that should be happening with finance and the select board and the school department. You know, so that we're clear about, you know, what it is that we anticipate, and if there are going to be needs, or if there are going to be additions that we're able to, you know, do to the department, to the school department, in terms of using and being creative with funds, you know, increased school choice funds, for example. And then move that into a STEM program, you know, or instead of, you know, putting a Band-Aid on.
Yeah. What else?
That's all.
Getting back to this list here, well, wait a minute, before I get back to the list, is there anything else as far as ideas that need to be part of this message?
I guess the one question I have, if I'm sitting in the town meeting, what the plan may be if only one of these makes it through. Like if we get the stabilization fund, but they vote no on the override, or vote no on the
So the list-
stabilization fund, but
yep.
yes on the override.
The list is prioritized, but, you know, to your point, it's not a clean, direct association with 395 or 291, that didn't quite work. You know, because we're talking about full salaries, and it just didn't seem authentic to try and meet that number. So certainly, if it's only, you know, one or the other, there might have to be a reconsideration. But our hope is that, you know, both are passed, and then if it's only one, then, you know, we may have to go into, you know, part of that and look a little differently. The other thing too to remember is that the budget is a moving target, so, you know, as we move forward, salaries in particular, if we have resignations and we replace with a lower salary or a higher salary, so, you know, those are some things that, you know, can really sway a budget, you know, with each hire by, you know, could be $15,000 to $20,000. So, you know, those are things that we always keep in mind as we work with, you know, these large amounts. So to your answer, this isn't like, oh, these things are gonna come back at 395 and these things are gonna come back at 291. It is a prioritized list.
But that would be really all I would need to know. Like, there is some thought as to what would
Yes.
happen if only one came back.
Yeah.
If you got one.
Yeah, it's that 267 to 307, that would have to be, we'd have to fix that. I just wanted to be hopeful. We're gonna get it. We need it. We need both, and we need both for different reasons. You know, I think part of the discussion too is the 2.9%, or the 291,000, the override, really is about the base of the budget. That's gonna sustain the base of the budget. The rest, the 395, in my opinion, is the negotiation of free cash, the change in the formula, how we talk about what the changing needs of the district are relative to the town needs.
That's what needs to be
You know,
communicated.
that needs, that should be a discussion.
Mhm.
That shouldn't be, the school department is told this is what you're gonna get. And you know, at the select board meeting, I think that there was some understanding of that. And then also the Special Education Reserve Fund, I think, is an opportunity for the town to move free cash into an account, it's like a stabilization account for education. And so that, you know, so when you put all of those pieces together with an influx or with a focus on bringing students here and keeping students here, in 2 years, you may have a better revenue side, which means the stabilization money isn't as required, and the base of your budget, either through the special ed reserve account and an override, all of a sudden now you've got some stability. So, that's not to say, you know, that in 3 years, we won't be re-looking at, you know, what we have, given there's so many variables on the horizon right now.
So that is something I just thought of, that canary in the coal mine argument. We used to have revolving funds in the budget, right, which is the savings. Like, the town has a stabilization fund, so should the schools. We don't have a, you know, stabilization fund in our budget anymore, and yet we are the largest budget in the town. And the town has, what, 7 million? Yeah, which is what works out to be how much of their budget? It's like 9%, one of the highest in the area, right? Did we determine that through data?
The stabilization?
Yes, the stabilization
We're
in
about
our
7%
town.
instead of 3 to 5.
7%, and the schools, which has an $11 million budget,
That's, yes, we can,
9, and we don't have any stabilization funds.
yeah.
And we used to, and other towns do, right, and they're starting to cut into their revolving funds because.
And we're paying for all of our own expenses. The town doesn't pay for our plowing, the town isn't paying for, right? They're not paying for our lights. Is that the case in other towns?
It's part of shared services.
Yeah, that's standard.
That's standard? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's a larger argument that, you know, where in the past, it just answers the question, you know, we used to be able to use revolving funds.
Yep.
We used to be able to use savings.
And I think, you know, what I heard from finance that I did not know, and correct me, Emery, anybody, you know, when they said, you know, the minimum net school spending plus 305, and we kind of washed our hands of the school department. So they didn't understand what was happening, and they didn't recognize that the spending down of revolving accounts was gonna put the school department on a cliff, and we're on the cliff. And so, you know, we've been saying these, you know, we've been raising the red flags, but you haven't really heard, and so now, I think now there's some understanding. But again, how do we solve the problem? Because it's not a school department problem.
No.
It isn't as simple as cutting 10 teachers. Because I think we've made the case that the base of the budget doesn't support the how expensive it is to educate children. We're gonna be in the same position next year. I know people don't wanna hear that, but we haven't fixed the revenue side.
Right.
So we're gonna be here again. And I know that's difficult, but, you know, that's the problem that needs to get solved. At some point, you're not gonna cut enough of anything, there will be nothing left to cut.
Oh, we're already there. All right, are we missing anything?
I think we're good, we're gonna
The only other question I would have, and it has nothing really to do, well, I can't say it has nothing to do, but has anybody, like, is it worth reaching out to the finance committee ahead of time to find out, if there's goodwill that's being built so far? It's pretty obvious when you're sitting on the other side that there's friction, right? And I'm sitting there watching the finance committee kind of throw you under the bus, sorry. And you come up for air, just trying to swing back, is kind of what I'm seeing. Is it worth reaching out to them to find out if we're gonna have that same problem?
What is the problem?
The noticeable friction, like, is there, since the last meeting we had,
Yeah,
is it worth,
the noticeable friction
and it all
is
has
a
to do with
friction
that
because of our positions. Obviously, they have a position from a finance committee perspective, we have a position from a school committee perspective. It is probably, you know, we're calling it friction, but our disagreement on how we're gonna resolve the school issue is being discussed probably as respectfully as it could be at this point. I mean, I think that probably was the most productive meeting that we ever had with the finance committee. In fact, it was the longest one as a school committee full, and it was the most productive. And going back to what you said is that there's always an assumption that everybody understands everything. And I know that they are making the same assumptions about us. I mean, the funds that could have been available for special education, the fact that money was taken out of general funds as opposed to the building funds or capital funds for the school building, that we find out later on. But it's because I think there is an assumption that everybody is on the same page, everybody understands it. And because we do not really communicate at that level frequently enough, when we find out about those things, obviously we speak from our own position, and that comes across as this friction. That is basically the tension that is caused by our positions, our disagreement, but also by some lack of communication that causes everything to be shared at that point in time. I don't know how quickly we can resolve it.
Well, which is why I'm saying, is it worth, because I don't know from that last meeting, they made it quite clear, last year's town meeting, and again, they are opposed to money coming out of stabilization.
Yeah, that's what they said last time too.
They made it very clear that they will not support funds coming out of stabilization, so I fully expect that Mr. LeBera will get up and read something to that effect, because they know that we have an article in for stabilization, and they said that they have no issues with a tax override question, and that they believe that it's, the will of the people. So we know what their position is.
Okay, but I was just wondering if we thought it might have softened a little bit with that last discussion, knowing that here we are reaching out to the town
To our,
for a little bit.
in that moment, I think maybe.
I hear what you're saying, and I think what I heard from that was, they are looking for sort of that 5-year plan. And I think, it does sort of behoove us to put together the numbers behind what we're talking about in terms of, in a year, when the school is open and functional, if we expect that we will have school choice such that there are 3 classes in every grade level, okay? What does that mean in terms of a revenue? What is that number? And then if we are able to keep students here and we stop school choice out, what is that number? If we're able to establish a special ed reserve account that comes out of free cash, what does that mean for our revenue picture and our funding picture? If we're able to have kids come, keep kids here, minimum net school spending will rise, which means the town's contribution will rise. And so what does that all mean in terms of the numbers? I don't think I have done a good job of putting that down on paper and explaining that to them, that this is the end goal. With an override, which increases the base of the budget, with an anticipation, it's the anticipation of things that I think is a little nerve-wracking, because I haven't sat down and said it would result in this kind of revenue over time, and therefore we would be, and I think they're waiting for that. So to your point, I would say yes, I think, you know, it would be important for us at some point to go back and have that conversation around the strategic plan, the finance picture, and then what are the measurable outcomes of that. And we had talked about some of the other accountability measures for schools, our kids taking non-credit bearing coursework at college or HCC or community colleges, you know, those kinds of measurable things. And that really is gonna be a discussion of the leadership team over the summer at our retreat. What is that picture gonna look like so that we can clearly communicate to
Yeah.
people who value the data that we're making progress?
So, two things then. One is in response to your question. I will reach out to John and see if there is an opportunity or need for us to come together because certain things may have changed or may not have been as clear during that meeting. I will do that. So that's a great point. I appreciate it because there is no reason why we should not continue to try to make that connection. So I'll do that. The second thing is part of the frustration that some folks who are familiar with all these, you know, planning cycles, part of the frustration that they are potentially feeling is the frustration that I feel often. It is, and we have this rhetoric, we feed it into our conversations, but we don't necessarily have the answer, which is, if we are making this investment, we call it an investment, if we're making this investment, and you're telling us this year and next year, what are you expecting to get out of it, and where do you see us? The challenge with that is that part of that narrative is very deeply correlated with the number of students that we're gonna have, and we don't know those.
Right.
But the other side of it, I think that's where you're going with that strategic plan, the 5-year plan thing. If everything works the way we expect them to, where do we land and why it's important for us to be there and how it's gonna get us to a point where we can start talking about sustainment as
Right.
opposed to needing
Reduction.
exactly.
Yeah.
Continuously reducing and also needing additional funds.
Right.
Because revenue, for us, revenue means more students. For us, revenue means being able to get grants through a larger number of students, being able to go and generate the revolving funds that we need through. So, but to be able to get there, that goes back to the vicious cycle conversation.
Right.
We need to get to that point, and it's not immediately visible to us.
Well, we haven't been able to do that. This topic came up at the committee's meeting, right? I remember John talking about, you know, do you have some sort of marketing campaign? And then I remember Jim Hartley saying something about a qualitative metrics, and which is all wonderful if we had the resources and the time and the energy to do it, because all of our time and energy is spent literally when we're doing 4 and 5 hour meetings on how to keep us afloat. So, I mean, these are all really lofty ideas, and it's wonderful if we are in the position to have the luxury of time and resources, and that's what we're trying
You have to
to
know
solve.
what you can market,
Yes, exactly.
I think you
right.
did-
What are we
you
gonna
did
market?
mention that- I think you did mention that there would be money if we were able to show them a just case as to say, let's get a team in here to sit with you and I forget the gentleman's name who's
Rob.
a business manager, to try to pull this information out of you to put these numbers into place. Like, I thought that's what I heard too, is there would be money for that if we thought we could prove it. Or at least show the need for it.
That's right.
Yeah.
We will try.
I think I missed that.
Yeah,
What was that special account?
because we're in this fight flight
Yeah,
mode all the
exactly.
time.
All
and-
the time.
right? We basically jump on the next fire drill and trying to extinguish the fire, but there is a lot of merit in putting our focus on that and how we do that.
And it's not as though we've never had these discussions. We've had discussions in school committee meetings about,
Well, we had a work group. I can't believe I'm gonna bring it up because I was supposed to follow through on a couple of things, but that's part of that work group discussion.
Yeah.
And you know, once this is settled and moving forward, maybe one of the summer meetings is a work group to revisit that,
Yeah.
to bring those
Maybe
pieces
that's why
back to the
Dorothy
table.
didn't make eye contact when we were in Boston.
I'm not gonna look at the camera.
oh, and I'm not gonna lie, in this, I mean, after we get through this budget, I mean, I need a month just to, like, pull myself together after, 6 months of this.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this as, complaining or being a whiner, it just, I mean, it
It's a lot
just,
of
it,
time.
it takes a lot of
stressful.
energy and mental energy, and it's like you just need a little time to regroup after that.
It'll be August.
And then you jump back in, exactly, in August, you're like, okay, I'm ready to go now, I'm recharged.
Here's something funny, today at work I was having a conversation, and because I mentioned, schools, education, funding, budgets, all the time, he said, it sounds like you have a second job. I said, yeah, it is.
It's an internship, is
It
what
is
it
an
is.
internship, yeah. Yeah. So I think we covered a lot of good topics that will help us put that document together.
Yeah.
Part of it, not all of it, will be on a flyer. I agree with you that we should have that one pager, whether it's, if the flyer is too busy, that doesn't serve the purpose of that one pager. It's good information, but there should be that one pager that lists the critical points, and then we speak to it.
Call out the cut. These
I was almost
proposed.
wondering if it couldn't be two-sided with sort of the first part, sort of the informational pieces, and then the what if.
Yep.
I
And
like
then a
that.
description of the.
So here's the critical part that we, the general we, not just us, but that is generally forgotten. Who's doing which part of this?
I knew I was gonna ask that, but thank you for asking that.
Sure. So I don't mind actually getting in some of the analysis, whether it's economic analysis or, finding some numbers. Maybe you and I can talk to see if we can share some of that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Jen is working on the flyer.
I'll do the design and put it together, but we need a timeline. Starting from, we said '08, through the years of cuts and votes.
Oh, you
And
mean
I-
timeline as far as what's happened from year to
2008.
year?
Yeah, like from the last year that we were in pretty good shape.
Well, that's,
1965, when did the school open?
I think we've used generally, 2010 as the initial marker.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't know if we're gonna be able to have time to come up with 7 years of,
I mean, it doesn't have to be, even if it just shows that in 2010 we had this vote, and then the decline, I can get the enrollment numbers from online.
Right.
But so we know we had that vote, we know that failed, and we know that caused a decline, so that we have a good starting point. And then I just wanna know, I'm trying to, I have it in my notes, I'll just look back, of what we ended up cutting the last, 2 or 3 years. I think it was even before I joined the board, so.
You know my quick gauge, right? Yearbook?
Yeah.
oh, yeah.
That's the programming.
Yeah, that's the programming
Yeah,
side
what
of it
kinds of
only,
things, yeah.
but, you
Yeah.
can't even see there's at
That's
least some
true.
evidence of it.
That's true.
Last year's numbers I have.
Okay.
I have that presentation, I have all that, so that's no problem. The year before that I might, but I don't have anything else before that.
I'll have to ask TMS.
Yes, they would have that.
So then the other piece of it is, what exactly do we want to present at the school committee meeting prior to the town meeting? What do we
Yeah,
want
that
this
PowerPoint.
initial, this summarized PowerPoint presentation, what,
Yeah, I see them
What's-
linked.
I do,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But you're gonna have more time to get into a bit more detail. I'm willing to do that.
Kidding.
I'm willing to do that part.
What part is that?
help kind of
Put the,
put it, yes, condense it, put it all together,
Okay,
and
so she preempted the question, I was gonna ask you what you wanted to do, so that's yours then.
I'd be willing to do
Okay,
that.
cool, thank you.
Not by myself, I'm
So-
No,
saying,
so so when we did the, joint meeting presentation,
Yes,
that worked really well. Emery and I went back and forth and
Right.
built the shell and started populating slides. So I would think that we could do it in Google Drive, and that people would be able to update it and add information, and therefore it's a collaborative sort of document, and then.
well, here's a suggestion. We drop all that stuff in there,
Yeah.
but since we cannot discuss what it
Right.
is, I think it may help if we get together very quickly and say, here are the pieces we're gonna be using and here's where we're gonna put it.
Mhm.
And finalize it hopefully fairly quickly, because by that time the data will be available and you will have at least that shell
Mhm.
for yours. We
Yeah.
will have some of the analysis done based on this conversation and put together. It's a matter of getting feedback, making the final changes, and where are we gonna put it and how are we gonna present it.
Mhm.
so what am I doing then?
Throw whatever, that condensed piece, right, the bullet, like
That we're gonna
bullet
discuss
points
when
for
we
that
get together.
5 minute, right? For the 5 minutes that we get, is that what you meant?
No, I don't know what you mean.
We
So
get-
you were gonna put a condensed version and gather basically all that piece of data that we're gonna drop? And then we're gonna
Condensed-
discuss it.
Condensed version of what?
What,
The pieces of
The
information that we're gonna be using, you said I will summarize it and put it
Oh,
somewhere.
no, you mean what we just talked about, the most
Yeah.
important?
yeah, you're
Yeah,
gonna condense
okay.
it down, right? for
So let
the-
me ask the question then, because now I'm confused. What was it that you volunteered for?
Well, what I thought I was volunteering for was, what the PowerPoint, what the school committee meeting is going to clearly communicate to the town before the town meeting.
Oh,
So you and I can work on the PowerPoint then.
But we still have to, I
We-
would prefer that we discuss, because if that's
Oh,
the,
Absolutely.
if that's the message that's gonna be consistent, then we should all, see it, talk about it, so that we all understand what's there, how we convey it and all that. In other words, it shouldn't be, here's what it is and we're gonna talk about that. Especially if I'm gonna be standing and I'm gonna hold something that I did not put together, I would like to understand what's in there. Make sense? Yeah?
Yeah, it makes sense.
I guess we got half commitment for now, just we'll work on the other half later. Anything else that we need to discuss on this?
Well, I did have a couple other questions on this list.
Mhm.
I just wanted some clarification on the half year,
Right, so we have a retirement,
right?
that what we were going to do was hire in September the new teacher for that position.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that would give the students a smooth transition and start the year with one teacher.
Okay, so you're not gonna do that
So we
now.
wouldn't be able to do that in a reduction. So we would have to hire mid-year.
Okay. And then the special education,
Right, so that's the one where, we have a real decline in a program, a specialized program. Not to zero, we still have student in the program, but if we forecast there's no students coming into that program, so if we had to make the reduction, we would make that now.
and what would happen to the other student or students that are in that program?
So the program would be restructured a little bit, and would include, more off-site, work. And again, it's kind of a specialized situation, and it's gonna sound corny, it's a little fluid, because of where the student is in the process, so.
So that,
Now, if you have a student going out for specialized programming, there's cost associated with that.
Right, but, there's also, money in the tuition line for special education.
Okay.
Or we could consider it an unanticipated cost and ask for it on town meeting floor.
If we don't
Well-
put it here, then if, yeah.
Just kidding. I was being snarky.
But if, so,
Sorry.
help me
No,
understand,
no,
Cheryl.
no.
If it goes in this direction, does it mean that we can still do this once it's determined, or this actually jeopardizes some of the things related to the program? And as Deanne asked, does it mean that some of the services will have to be,
So
received from
basically-
outside and it's gonna cost more?
Right, so basically, we have a program that would be ending next year, FY '19. We could just make that decision a year earlier, provide a different program for the student left. That wasn't our intent. Our intent was to continue the program as it had been planned, but knowing that the program is ending in a year with no other students coming into that program in 7th grade. This is a post-high school student, so there's no other
Okay, I see what
students
you're saying.
that are feeding into this program. And so,
I see what
if we
you're
have to make a reduction, again, I will say this again, none of these do I recommend. These are core
Yeah.
parts of our program. But if we had to, then we would make the decision to end the program earlier. It is counter to what we believe is good special education, which
Because
is
that's
keeping
gonna
students.
impact the student,
Of course, and we have a commitment
especially a
from.
student who's in special education as it is,
Mhm.
and in which change is even more challenging.
Correct, which is one of the reasons why we decided to continue the program originally. And it is a commitment of our department in special education that we keep students on site as much as possible, not just because of the fiscal impact, but because of the emotional impact and the desire of the families typically to keep their kids in the schools.
But that doesn't impact the two other programs you're trying to build?
Correct, no, it
Okay.
does not, no.
And that's something else that we need to make clear. That's actually, that's a very good point. Because we talk about special education, especially the social emotional learning program, as our strength, and we expect that to be one of our strong programs. We should make sure that everybody understands, because if we're asking the question, somebody else may have the perception that we're now going against what we said. Instead of strengthening the program, we're eliminating something.
Yeah, that family or those families that you were talking about, thinking about coming back, maybe right out the door again, I think, right?
Right, yeah. Mhm.
So the final question is the lunch monitors, and you
Yes.
said that administration would cover it, so
Yes.
How would that impact administration?
Administration, for the hours of lunch, at the high school, I think they're going to 2 lunches next year, so it's between the hours of, I believe, 10:30 and 12:18. During those times, they would be sharing the load of covering the calf, which, they do now, but with a monitor, they are free to, respond, to meet with students. So it is a reduction in their flexibility and being able to respond to students and parents timely, if they're, in the cafeteria, if they're required in the cafeteria as opposed to being an additional monitor in the cafeteria.
Backup.
Yes. Oh, I thought you said backup. I was like,
No.
ready to back up. Yeah, so right now they're back, absolutely right. So they're there the majority of the time because it's good practice as an administrator to be at lunch, to meet and mingle and observe and to supervise lunch. But certainly they are not the only monitor currently.
The tuition, is that related to the same program? Special ed
No,
tuition?
so, if you recall in the original budget, there was a tuition, in special education for, unanticipated tuitions and contingencies.
Yeah.
I absolutely believe that should be in the budget, so that on a $9 million, almost $9 million budget, we should be able to handle, $100,000 in flux. That's why that line is there.
Well, that's not, I mean, that's not, it could sound like it's 100,000.
No, it's
like less than-
69,
Less than $70,000.
Right, but we should be able to, in a budget of $9 million, be able to handle, a tuition that comes in. That's not the case if these kinds of reductions are put on the table.
Okay. All right. So for the impact part, can we find out how many students actually will be affected, if there are classrooms, what the class size changes will be? Some other constraints that may not be as obvious to us, but
Right.
from your perspective, we should be as clear as far as the impact of these reductions as possible. It's not just money. We keep on saying that, we
Right.
should do what we say and show the educational impact on the students, on on teachers, on the school.
Especially the middle school and how it impacts the high school. I know I said this before, but reducing the instructional time, having more of this guided study and I just think
And
that's
one of the
really
things it
important.
will mean is that, electives will be over-enrolled. So the numbers of students in electives will be very high. Your gym classes looking, back out at the 45, numbers. And then, so specials or electives, there's another point too. I need my dinner. I can't remember what game it was.
Mike, did you have anything else?
Nope.
Jen?
Nope.
Deanne? We're good for now? Was there anything else that you wanted to discuss in open session? We have an executive session, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay. All right.
No, I'm good.
Okay, so is there a motion to, actually, we're going into executive session, so we're gonna vote to enter into executive session under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 1, Part A3, to discuss strategy with regard to collective bargaining, as doing so in an open session may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. The committee will not return to open session. Can we have a roll call, please?
Deanne Payne Mikowski, aye.
Jennifer Curran, aye?
Anne Marie Everett, aye.
Yeah, Mike Simpson, aye.